This episode of DocTalk is brought to you by First Bank. We're not just your neighborhood bank, we're your neighbors. Our local team lives up to the name, putting our customers and community first. To experience First Bank difference, stop by any of our 13 Knoxville area locations or visit firstbankonline.com. First Bank, member FDIC.
Hello, I'm Dr. Rob Page and welcome to DocTalk. DocTalk is a podcast that's produced by the Knoxville Academy of Medicine and features its physician members giving information to patients that proves helpful in terms of making their healthcare decisions. And with me today I have Dr. Greg Mancini. Dr. Mancini is a surgeon with University Surgeons at University of Tennessee Medical Center. And the topic that we're going to talk about today is bariatric surgery. First, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Happy to be here.
Bariatric surgery. General term may not be familiar to a lot of folks. What is bariatric surgery?
Most people think of bariatric surgery as weight loss surgery. That's how most of the public thinks about it. And so it's really the idea that our weight that we carry is not just a outward sign of poor health, but is a sign of our body not handling most of its metabolic pathways well. And so the bariatric surgery is really focused on trying to improve their metabolic systems through weight loss.
So now we know a lot about this because there are TV shows that sort of feature on it.
Sure.
We have like My 600-Pound Life.
Yep.
And a lot of shows that have shown that the very success in this. If I'm a patient, and this is something that I think might prove valuable to me, what sort of patients are generally eligible for this surgery?
Sure. The first thing to know is what your weight is and what your height is. So if you know those two factors, you can go to any website and look up what's your BMI. So BMI is a calculation, it's a ratio between your height and your weight. So I think a lot of people can understand that Shaquille O'Neal can be 7 feet tall and 350 pounds and be a relatively healthy weight. Yeah. But take that same person at 350 pounds and shrink them to 5'5", and that BMI, which is a relationship between those two, becomes an unhealthy weight.
Right.
And so that's the starting point. So if your BMI is over 40, the National Institutes of Health says you should consider bariatric surgery. And it actually has a lower number, say a BMI of 35, if you have a major medical condition. Typically it's heart disease, diabetes, sleep apnea, plus a BMI of 35, means surgery should be considered.
So if you're thinking about like a man who's average height like 5'10", or a woman who's 5'3", 5'4", what general weight would that be?
So women are in the category of about 240 to 250 pounds. And for men, it's typically around 300 pounds.
So anybody over 300 pounds. So now in saying that, are there certain patients who, because I know this is, and again I have to sort of refer to what we know on television. Are there patients who aren't eligible because they are too obese or their BMI is too high?
That's one of the dangers of the shows that are
right,
sensationalized.
Right.
So what we know with our surgeries is people will only lose so much weight.
Right.
And so when you take somebody who's 600 pounds, and you give them a gastric bypass or a gastric sleeve and they lose 200 pounds. That's phenomenal,
right.
But they still weigh 400 pounds,
yeah.
And they are still in a dangerous weight. So a lot of the medical societies around bariatrics has focused on getting people to a healthier weight even before surgery.
Right.
So say I have a person who comes in at 450 pounds, okay? Say it's a big man, he's 6'5", he's been big his whole life, he works in machinery, and he's been a big guy his whole life, but his weight has grown. And now he's 450 pounds. So what we're going to do is BMI may be 60. So we're going to work with him probably 6 or 8 months. He'll lose 60 pounds, get him down to around 350, 360. Now his BMI is in that target weight where a gastric bypass or gastric sleeve is actually going to get him to the weight that he's needing to be. So our goal from a health standpoint is to aim to get a BMI below 30. So if your BMI is below 30, you're no longer obese. You're overweight, but you're not obese. And why that's important is that if you look at heart disease, stroke risk, diabetes risk, all those risks begin to really mount when your BMI is over 30. So we actually don't target people to get to a normal weight. We target them to go from their red line weights down to the overweight category because that's when their health becomes equivalent to other healthy patients.
Now you mentioned something important there. So if I'm a patient who's has a BMI of over 30 or even higher than that, I can get a consultation with you. You're not just going to say, okay, I'm going to schedule you for surgery, here's the date for surgery, and that's what we're going to do. You have more of a comprehensive approach to these patients in terms of how you approach weight loss and their health in general.
Sure. That's one of the really defining features of bariatric surgery. It's so different than almost every other surgery done. If your hip is bad, you go in for hip replacement, you may be seen on a Tuesday, and 3 weeks later you've got a hip replaced. If you've got a hernia, you may have that fixed in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Well, most patients who undergo bariatric surgery are spending 4 to 6 months in a period of time where they're preparing for surgery. And that's because we recognize that the long-term results a lot depend on a person's adaptation to the surgery, and that adaptation requires some preparation. So if people are overeating, they have to work on reducing how much food they eat in a day, because if they do that after surgery, they're going to really hurt themselves. If they don't have physical activity in their daily life, they've got to start doing that beforehand, and that's going to be something that perpetuates them to long-term health. Surgery probably represents about 15 to 20% of the success of weight loss.
Wow.
Okay? The majority of it is adapting behaviorally to that. And we know from most psychological studies it takes about 2 years for a habit to become a lifelong habit. So take that from all scenarios. So if you want somebody to do physical activity, they got to do it consistently for 2 years before it becomes a lifelong thing. If you want your kids to brush their teeth every day, it takes 2 years for them to do that consistently before it becomes something that becomes rote. And so with a lot of our patients, we're starting with very poor life habits that we're working on, and then we're going to add surgery in there to help their success. But it's those lifelong behavioral changes that really have to do with it.
So on average, you're not just seeing a patient, 4, 5, 6 times. You're seeing a patient, over a period of years,
Sure,
multiple times in your clinic.
So the bariatric care looks a lot like, say, breast care,
right,
where a person may be diagnosed with breast cancer and have surgery, chemo, radiation, but they're going to have annual follow-ups, looking for surveillance, making sure there's no recurrence. Bariatrics has a very similar path to that. A person will come in, be evaluated, found to be a good candidate for surgery, undergo surgery, then they'll undergo surveillance for 2 to 5 years. I have patients of mine that I've seen every year for 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, so if I'm a patient and I'm looking to think, I'm thinking to myself, well, this is going to be a quick fix. I'm going to go in, I'm going to get the surgery, I'm going to kind of learn maybe a few behavioral changes, and then I'll be out of care and then I'll lose the weight. That's not realistic at all.
Yeah. So when the person comes in with that idea, we spend a lot of time kind of taking a step back, saying this is why that process hasn't worked. There are places you can fly and get your surgery on a weekend. Programs like mine and other programs end up taking care of the problems related to that, because those patients haven't done the behavioral things to get ready for their surgery.
So what is the success rate of something like this? When when a patient follows the routine, they actually see you on a regular basis, they get the surgery, and then they continue to follow up and actually enact a lot of the changes that they need to in order to maintain a healthy lifestyle. What's the success rate of a lot of that?
So if you look at, we have great data for this, because every one of the cases in the United States that's done for bariatric surgery is logged into a national database.
Oh.
So that is 3-month waits, 6 months waits, 1-year waits, 18-month waits, 2-year waits. And you can see program to program how often people are returning. And if you move from one place to another, you can be logged in another program. So there is a nationwide surveillance of this. So if you look at 2 years, the success rate of people moving down to that BMI of 30 is about 60% to 65%.
Wow.
And so you have about 30% of patients who don't quite get to that 30%. They're still having a lot of success and they have a lot of improvement. There are failures that come out there, and there are 2 mechanisms of failure that address. One are the people that don't lose weight to start. That is a real biologic anomaly that we see sometimes, where an individual will have the surgery and their weight will be very modest afterwards. And then you have folks that have a tremendous weight loss, they drop on their curve, but then they haven't sustained their habits and they begin grazing, they begin eating more calories in a day and going back and returning to their old habits, and those patients have weight regain. But if you look at 2 years and 5 years, we're looking at 60 to 70% success
That's
rates.
incredible. Now, one of the things that you hear from patients from time to time, and just to discuss the sort of the reality, the idea of this, are there really patients out there who just cannot lose weight despite the fact that they're limiting their calories, or despite the fact that they're increasing their activity? Is there some mechanism by which these patients just cannot lose the weight, be it some sort of metabolic change, or be it it's just some sort of physiologic mechanism that keeps them from losing the weight?
There are. We know in general central obesity has a much greater weight loss than peripheral obesity. So we've all seen patients who have very small waists and they have very large thighs and legs. That peripheral obesity is very stubborn to weight loss. So they will have very modest weight loss. They may lose 20 to 30% of the weight, whereas somebody who carries it centrally, right in the mid area, they'll lose 60 to 70% of their excess weight. So there are differences in how that are more hormonal related. That honestly, that science is still getting worked out on some of that stubborn weight loss.
Yeah, I got you. So, so let's say that I'm a patient. I'm willing to make the the life change. How would I go about? I want to contact your clinic. So what would be? So you told us that you'd be average probably in care, maybe for as long as they need to be in care. But just the surgery itself, what would be the time frame for that? What generally is the recovery? How long do these patients expect to be out of work, or how long would they be out of commission?
Sure. So most of our patients spend, like I said, somewhere between 4 and 6 months prepping for surgery. They'll come in, they'll have surgery. Surgery typically takes about 2 hours. It's done robotically or laparoscopically. That's pretty much nationwide.
Gotcha.
Most patients for gastric bypass will spend about 1 to 2 nights in the hospital, and then they'll be at home for their recovery. All intestinal surgery takes about 30 days for proper healing, so that healing process is about that time. In that first 4 weeks, it's all about a diet progression, so they'll go home drinking liquids, adding proteins that are liquid form, and then they'll do what we call a diet progression, and not adding real solid foods for a month. Right. So that's not fun for patients, but we give them the building blocks for healing, which is critical, and if they put things in their stomach that their stomach's not ready for, they get very sick. So that's very regimented. For most patients, they have a low activity for about 2 weeks. Most patients return to work at about 2 weeks. If they have very heavy labor, or they have if there's a lot of water loss in their type of work, if they're manual laborers, or they have restrictions on ability to get access to water, they're out for 4 weeks. So the number one problem after surgery is dehydration.
Interesting.
So a person may be able to drink, a glass of water in about 30 seconds. Well, after a weight loss surgery, it may take 30 minutes.
Yeah, something you don't think about.
Yeah. So say you work for an auto machine company that on a factory where they assemble things, right? And you get about a 4-hour shift, and then a 30-minute shift off, and then another 4-hour shift. You only have 30 minutes to consume all the water you're supposed to have in 4 hours. So there are some things that are kind of work-related that you have to work around. But most people that can have a glass of water at their desk, they can go back to work when they like.
Gotcha. So it's so important to know that if this is surgery that you're eligible for and something you want to get, you don't necessarily just need to think about it as I'm going to get the surgery and then my life's going to be fine after that. There are a lot of changes, a lot of behavioral changes, a lot of lifestyle changes that need to be done in order to be able to consider this.
So the post-op is really about continuing them to adapt to their new diet, right. Building on what their successes were before. It's also vitamin supplementation because they aren't taking in the same volume of food, right. And so we have to monitor their vitamins. There are significant neurologic defects where people can get if they are low on B12 or B6. Mm-hmm. You've seen thiamine deficiencies. So these are things that we take for granted when we have a large stomach, when we have our stomach altered. Vitamin supplementation is important, and that's tested quarterly.
Gotcha. So, so let's say I'm interested in contacting your office. I'm somebody who could be an eligible patient. How would I go about contacting you and/or getting additional information if I'm interested in looking that up?
Sure. Well, bariatrics is all over the web. So putting in, UT Bariatrics, Knoxville Bariatrics, UTMedicalCenter.org is fine. And then the phone number is 305-WELL. 305-WELL.
We'll have that down at the bottom of the screen. And your office is located at the medical center.
At the medical center.
Do you have any outside offices, or do you see all your patients down there?
We have a specialized designed office to accommodate patients of the size we take care of, and that includes the chairs and the beds and the scales. So that's centralized at UT Medical Center.
Excellent. So not only if you're a patient who's going to, if you think about all the things you have to do ahead of time, if you are a person of size, you accommodate that.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So, well, Dr. Mancini, thank you so much for joining me here today and giving us a lot of information about things that we don't think about when it comes to something like weight loss surgery, about all the different changes that we need to undertake in our lives in order to be able to, to think about if this is going to be a good surgery for us.
I appreciate the time. Thank you.
And with that brings this episode of DocTalk to a close. DocTalk is a podcast that is produced by the Knoxville Academy of Medicine. that features its physician members giving information to patients that are helpful in terms of making their healthcare decisions. I'm Dr. Rob Page, and thank you so much for joining us.
This episode of DocTalk is brought to you by First Bank. We're not just your neighborhood bank, we're your neighbors. Our local team lives up to the name, putting our customers and community first. To experience First Bank difference, stop by any of our 13 Knoxville area locations or visit firstbankonline.com. First Bank, member FDIC.